Welcome to Real Estate Done Rightish, your favorite podcast for realtors by realtors. I'm Jen.
And I'm Annalie. And for a combined 30 years, we've been working in this industry just trying to figure it out. And by figuring it out,
we mean we can sense the presence of hidden water damage, like moisture detecting bloodhound with commitment issues.
Why with commitment issues?
I don't know what it means. Do you know what that means?
Well, like a bloodhound is usually very committed.
A moisture detecting bloodhound with commitment issues. We can sense the presence of hidden water damage. Does it make us unsure? Probably.
I don't know. I don't get it.
I don't get it either, but it was supposed to be funny, so we hope you all laughed at it.
I did. I liked it. But then I was like, wait, what does that mean?
It's confusing.
Yeah. Well, so is life.
Oh my gosh. Tell me about it. Golly.
All right.
That's what we say in Minnesota. Golly.
Is it?
No, we really say oofta.
Ope. I say ope a lot.
O-P-E. And you know what? Let me just clarify this. For those of you that say oofta, if you're not Norwegian, that's where it comes from. The Norwegian parts of the world, which are also known as Norway. And it's spelled U-F-F-D-A. So if you're spelling it O-F-T-A, you're really wrong.
Who's doing that?
I've seen it.
Oh.
It's just really...
Are people spelling oofta a lot? I'm so confused. This went
all the time.
It's already off the rails,
it's
and we just started.
Hot dish and oofta, and when you get it wrong, I'm gonna correct
the Norwegians are gonna come for you.
That's me. I'm Norwegian.
I know.
Look
I'm
out.
not.
You know what Norwegians are at the heart? Vikings.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Look out.
Okay.
Uncommitted bloodhound.
It's got so weird so fast.
I know. Okay, let's move on.
Well, if you like this weird intro, don't forget to follow us, share us with your friends, rate and review, all the stuff that helps us get in front of more people like you.
Yeah, it's not all this weird. If this is your first episode, well, it is a little weird, but actually do share it, please. Like if there's somebody that you think might benefit from the content, which is actually helpful, go ahead and pass it along. Okay.
What are we talking about today?
Woo, it's an economic update, which we're doing about monthly.
Yeah.
And we're kind of talking about them every week in our Happiest Hour episodes too, which this one is not. But this whole episode is dedicated to talking about what's happening in the economy right now, and we will weave in how it relates to real estate.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be looking mostly at specifically real estate economic outlook.
Yeah, that's what you think.
I don't know what you prepared, but so it is June 2025, in case you didn't know.
Yeah.
And in June of 2025, the NAR puts out a real estate and economic outlook kind of report. I have the slideshow in front of me. I'm just going to touch on a few things from this that I think are pretty interesting. We've like you mentioned, we've been talking a lot about headlines, weekly economic changes. So we've talked a lot about most of the things that are in this slideshow, which I was kind of like,
oh, we're doing our job.
We're staying on top of it a little bit more than...
Well, and I've said this to you over and over, and prior to doing the podcast, when I was getting back into the industry, and part of why I chose to come back to this office was because there are conversations like this happening.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm going to be at the kitchen table with people talking about what's happening in the world. It's the part of my job that I want to have a close pulse on, and where am I getting the info, which is why we want to do this.
Yeah.
Part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'll just anecdotally share. I have some clients that are not really sure what they want when it comes to buying. They're living in their cabin right now. So we just look at a house every once in a while. This morning showed a house to Mrs. Buyer, and then her daughter was along. Found out daughter is now looking to sell and probably move in the next year due to some things that happened at their house. And just like right out of the gates, they were just like, oh, what's happening in real estate? And they just wanted a download on what was happening nationally. They had heard some things, what were happening locally. We're in Minnesota, if you don't know. So we've had some really interesting things happen in the last week, which we'll chat about a little bit in our happy hour this week. But so no, just being able to blab about this stuff, just when I'm going to show one house that I honestly was pretty sure they weren't going to buy. It was just kind of a research moment. again, just sets you apart. And like,
1,000%.
they know that they're going to be able to get that from me. And I was not really prepared for it, but I was.
But
right?
you are, because
I
we're talking about it. Yeah. Yep.
So, few just kind of interesting things that I thought right away in this economic forecast. Again, this is all by NAR, and I'll give you the sources of some of these. They just touched on right out of the gates that the Federal Reserve economic forecast has been downgraded from what it was expected coming into 2025. So what does that mean? Rates aren't going to go down as quickly as it was anticipated. The GDP forecast was, it was expected to go up 2.1%. And that was from the end of 2024 forecast for 2025. That has been updated to 1.7. So just a slight decrease in the expected GDP growth.
Yep.
Okay.
Slower growth than expected.
Slower growth than expected. Exactly. Yep. Thank you. Inflation, the previous forecast was 2.7. That has been raised to 2.5. I'm sorry. So again, end of 2024, it was expected to be at 2.5. And I think that was for Q1. Now that has been raised to 2.7.
Okay, if you want more in depth, if you're like, what is GDP? What is inflation? Go back and listen to our first market economic, I can't remember what we called it, but
it's economic update.
Economic update or state of the market. I think it's called state of the market something or other. And we go in depth on what all of these terms are. Yeah.
Yeah. So just GDP lower than expected, inflation a little higher than expected. Both of those are pointing to the Fed rate, which again informs all other rates, not dropping as quickly as anticipated. I'm not going to go into a ton about Treasury and where that's sitting and all of that stuff. I'm going to jump just to some things that I personally found interesting.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about a lot of this. So if you want more about what's been going on in the last few weeks, go listen to our happiest hours, because the last 2 or 3 have been
touching on
pretty heavy on some timely economic updates.
I don't know if this is the right time. I listened in on Jerome Powell's. He's the Fed Chair Reserve.
Yeah, let's talk about that now.
So I took notes, but I was writing really fast, and so I hope that I can read what I was writing. And this is the first time I'm reading it. So here we go.
So accuracy and actually what it says might be a little...
So if you guys, I don't know what you think about him. Of course, all of this stuff feels all political. I'm just going to, as an aside, I so appreciated how he was presenting this information, because it was not emotional. He just was like, and he was getting tough questions about why the decisions are making. So the Feds decided to hold the rate where it was at. The Fed rate, there was speculation that they were going to decrease it. Other countries have lowered their rates right now. Trump is suggesting that we should be lowering ours because other countries are lowering theirs. And so Jerome Powell is taking some heat for that. And so they were asking him, like, why aren't we considering lowering it when everybody else is? And you're basing decisions based on data. And what he was saying is that our economy is actually pretty stable right now. He used the word that you mentioned in one of our last episodes about resilient. We have sort of resilient economy.
Consumerism.
Yeah. And so people were asking, well, if you're basing your decisions based on past data and we're looking pretty strong right now, why aren't you going ahead and lowering the rates? And then he rattled off 3 things. He's like, whenever we talk about this, we talk about these 3 things. And now I can't remember what they were and I couldn't write them fast enough. But one is looking back. And then he talked about how we are always looking forward through the forward, what's it called? The window
windshield?
In front of windshield. Yeah. I was like, what's the word?
The one in front of you? Yeah,
this is my middle-aged brain. Anyways, he was like, we're always looking forward as well. And because right now, he said, end of fourth quarter last year, they knew that tariffs were going to be a thing, but they didn't know how high the tariffs might be. So the level of uncertainty was lower. When the announcement about the tariffs came in terms of what the range would be, then the level of uncertainty increased a ton. And so what he was saying is the level of uncertainty is still there's still uncertainty there, but the level of uncertainty has gone down because we've been resilient.
Yep.
And so he's saying, but looking forward, there's still a huge unknown about how the tariffs are going to impact us. Yep. And then he was saying that somebody's going to pay, again, this is not new, but I'll just reiterate it. Somebody's going to pay for the tariffs. So he talked about the manufacturer, the exporter, the importer, the business. These are the
so
things.
many things, yeah.
He's like, so we have all of these variables that are so uncertain, really based on the tariff. And so he said, because we're relatively stable right now and there's still this huge level of uncertainty moving forward, we're just going to hold tight until we have more data. And he just kind of said it like, because we're stable right now, if we just need to wait a few more months to get more data on how the tariffs impact all of these other things, then we'll make a new decision at that point. And I was like, yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and it is the basis of any decision that's being made economically, right? So what I'm going to bring that to is real estate, right? We are consistently looking at old data in the rearview mirror. That's the only thing we have. Old is sold.
Yeah.
To predict future. And we're trying to use past consumer behavior to predict future consumer behavior, taking into account other pressures that are in the current market, that being competition, literal economic factors like unemployment, like major economic changes, economic uncertainties. And so it's kind of the same thing. And if we can go in like he did and really have this just like, listen, we are looking at data that's old to inform, and then we have to take in anecdotal and other economic inputs to predict future consumer behavior. This isn't me trying to do anything to you. It is us. This is an economic decision, and it's based on
that's
data.
so good.
I think if we can go in that level-headed, it just, again, I think it puts us back into being that like expert, that fiduciary, instead of coming in with emotion or uncertainty or being like nervous about talking about certain things. That's why that chair of the Fed can go just like, this isn't an emotional decision.
Yeah.
I know it creates emotional response, but this is why we're doing it. And this is, and kind of same thing to lead our clients.
So appreciate that. And I love that you're making that parallel, because I mean, we've talked about this before. When you go to large conferences or when you watch somebody train, I'm looking for the content, but I'm also watching how they're delivering the content, because there's so much to learn from that. And I just to pinpoint that parallel, like, if you're curious at all, I think it's worth going back. PBS News is what I was watching it on. You could go back and watch his whole press conference today and just note how he handles the questions, how he uses humor to diffuse in some points, how he's stripping emotion out, but without being sterile, he's still being human. Like, there was a lot for me to learn in how he was delivering. Whatever if you agree or not with his decision or their decision, that's not the point that I'm making right now. I just think that's super valuable. He also said, one thing he said was, we have to be humble in knowing that we haven't been through this before. And that, because people were talking about the Fed rate paths that they've set ahead, like, this is where we think rates are going to go and what we think might happen. He's like, we haven't been through this before, so we have to be humble with knowing that. And no one that is predicting, that is paid to predict these right now and has accurate data and is looking at it, has a great deal of conviction with the paths that have been put out. And we just can't, because we remember the level of uncertainty that we're facing, because that we can't. So it was like a non-update again, but helpful to watch, I thought.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
I also think it's really interesting that there's so much of what's happening economically right now where consumers are not behaving the way that they should be.
What do you mean by
based
that?
on past trends? Kind of what you just said, how he's saying there's so much uncertainty right now. But in the past, for instance, if inventory was rising in markets, I'm going to bring this back to real estate specifically. If inventory is rising, typically when inventory rises, we see buyers fall at the same time, because there's something economically that's pushing sellers to sell, and there are fewer. Those same economic pressures are pushing less buyers into the market. Okay, right now what we're seeing is in markets where there's rising inventory, buyers are rising as well.
Yeah.
And why, right? Like, so that's just one little example, but across these economic things that we're watching and that the Fed is watching, the triggers that would usually trigger one response they're not triggering that response. So it's an opposite response. So there are so many economic things that are happening that are not along the path of like when you're talking about past predictors of where the rates were going, that was what made me think of this. There's so many things that if we look at what should be happening in response to X, it's opposite or it's a very
like
different
you'd
response.
normally be sitting on opposite ends of a seesaw and like when this moves, this goes this way, and we're not seeing that right now. And so it's like, what is happening? Well, and I wonder how much of this again is just partially like as a society, as a world, we've responded to COVID in a certain way, and then resilience has sort of come from that. We've learned from like the reactivity that we obviously had to have. Like he actually talked about that. He's like, when we knew COVID was hitting, we put rates down to 0 almost immediately because we knew looking forward that it was going to be really hard.
Yep.
And so he was, all that being said, we've evolved in how we behave because of the history that we've been through in the last however many 5 years, you know?
Well, and I think the resiliency or the amount of
wisdom, I guess, is maybe a way to put that. Do you think it's wisdom?
I don't think so.
You don't think so?
I think it's emotion. I think we've been in a heightened emotional state for a really long time. Again, whichever side politically you sit on, I think there's emotions politically. I think there's been, there's definitely emotions coming out of COVID or during COVID, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
How different people reacted. Different people had different emotions. And I think emotional spending is part of all of this. And like triggered spending is part of all of this. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all interesting. Well, speaking of COVID, the next slide that I found really interesting was that we are up 7 million payroll jobs from pre-COVID numbers.
No way.
Yeah. So, and I was just looking, January, I'm not going to say the numbers, but in January, February, March, pre-COVID in 2020, payroll jobs was up in the 150,000, which is like, I don't know.
Plus 7 million. Yeah.
A bunch of millions.
Yeah.
a whole bunch of millions. But we'll call it 1.5. Yeah. I'm going to say 1.5, but that's probably like 1.5 trillion. I didn't put the zeros in place to know.
Yeah.
I think, it would be like billion or trillion. Anyway, we were like 1.52. It dropped all the way down to 1.3 when COVID hit and when all of the, think of all the jobs that went away, climbed back up to like 1.4 pretty quickly, all in 2020. And then it's taken just a long time, but now we are up to like 1.6. So we're up 7 million from, call it January, February, before COVID was announced. So just, very interesting. And these are payroll jobs. So these are jobs, we're not in this. These are jobs, W-2 jobs.
It's interesting because I feel like, again, this is why it's like you hear things on social media and people are speculating and and this is not to say that this is not a thing that's going to happen, but I feel like the thing that's been buzzing around my feed lately, one of the things is AI and how AI is going to take jobs and how people need to figure out their side hustles now and all of this stuff. And so while we simultaneously have increased payroll jobs, I'm wondering how long that'll hold, like when AI actually will start to take effect or anything else that will cause people to lose jobs. But yeah, that's interesting to me.
Yeah, that was the first thing that kind of wage growth is currently outpacing consumer price. So and this is a percentage. So the increase of growth in wages is at 3.8%. Consumer price increases are at 2.3 right now. And I believe that's like year over year. They didn't give, percent change from a year ago. So year over year. So wages are outpacing the consumer pricing. And this is not inflation. So I'm not exactly sure what goes into that number. But I thought that was interesting.
That is interesting.
Again,
he talked about that today, Jerome Powell, too. They were like, our economy is actually relatively strong. And he talked about wage growth being increasing. But then one of the reporters cited weak housing data. And I'm like, I wonder if that's units sold nationally speaking or shifting into seller's market. But
buyer's market.
Yep. Sorry. Thank you. Buyer's market.
Well, we're going to shift into that right now.
Oh, look at that transition. It's a segue.
Existing home sales. So this is not new construction. Home sales that are already existing. We're coming out of two of the most difficult years, and we talked about this in a happy hour. I think since 2009. So both 23 and 24, we had just over 4 million existing home sales. That is incredibly low. 2021 adversely was 6 million.
So crazy.
So 2/3.
Yeah.
As many.
Yeah.
So that's down. And the last few months, they're not showing any recovery as well.
Recovery in home, like the
existing
rate
home
of
sales,
home sales going up at all.
Exactly. How many?
Maybe we'll talk about this. We'll talk about this when we record our happy hour episode about how that makes us feel as realtors and what we want to do about it. But
yeah. There are, we've just heard this in headlines that there are light changes in mortgage applications to buy a home. So the percent change from a year ago is up a little bit, but nothing crazy.
I did just see another graph too on that note about, it was a graph over the last, 20 years, 2008. Yeah. So almost 20, how many years is that? 20 years. Yeah. And they were showing the credit rating of the mortgages and how many people had a credit rating of, below 600, above 600, up to 700. Yeah. And it was like a whole bunch of red, which was people that had subpar credit scores, and how now it's almost all blue. And for the last many years, because people have really high credit scores. But again, we talked about this in one of our episodes.
There weren't mortgage products that allowed for low credit scores for a really long time coming out of the housing crisis. So
now it's eking up a little bit, and we've talked about this before. I do think that there's a case to be made to give people opportunity. And that was one of the things that I saw in this post, that somebody was like, hey, it's great. We've got people with really strong credit scores, but how many people are we keeping out of the housing market right now? But then again, we don't have enough supply, in theory, in some areas.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. This is actually the first thing that I stopped at and was like, oh. So 5-year home price gains appreciation, but a 5-year appreciation percentage. So this is since
appreciation
pre-COVID.
Over 5 years. And we're going to put the link to this whole slideshow. Are we going to put the link to this whole slideshow in the show notes?
Yeah. So this is not a year-over-year appreciation. This is a 5-year appreciation. So a cumulative of 5 years.
Okay.
So top states. In 5 years, Montana had 69.9% appreciation.
That is insane.
Yeah. Maine.
Yeah.
75%.
Holy crap. So if you owned a home for $500,000, 75% of that is 175 times 3 is. You're gonna see how I do my math in my head.
I know. I'm so curious. Well, it would be 50,000 times 7.5. That's how I do it. Which would be 350,000 plus 25,000.
375. So then you add the 375, 875. So if you bought a home 5 years ago for $500,000, it's now worth 875 in Maine.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And this is obviously averages and doesn't,
Right. So some of you are doing better than that. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, I was talking to somebody today. They bought 5 years ago. I didn't even know this chart existed before when we were having this conversation. But she said, interestingly, well, we bought 5 years ago. We bought for $500. I think our house is probably worth around $650. So we've got 30% appreciation. And she was just like, so we're good. We can sell because they're thinking about moving. And they were worried about their appreciation for some reason. Okay, I just pulled those two out because they're some of the top two numbers in the nation. But what I find is incredibly interesting is we just were talking about markets that flip to buyers markets. I think it was in our last week's happy hour maybe. So again, I'm going to keep pushing people to those happy hours because there's a lot of economic stuff there.
Yeah.
But we were talking about which markets were flipping to buyers markets. Well, guess what that correlates with?
What? You tell me.
A bunch of the top markets that had the most gains in the last 5 years.
Interesting.
So Arizona, 64%. Florida, 68.7%.
Huh.
And I'm gonna touch on this a little bit in another economic outlook. Now, California, Washington were not in those very top states, which were in some of the markets that were flipping already.
What's the correlation? Like, is there a correlation between price gains and it flipping to a buyer's market?
A lot of times, the more volatile markets will also correct when economic corrections need to be made, right? If you think about huge gains, when there's an economic shift, they're going to have usually huge losses. So some of the markets, when we had the housing crisis, now economically, I don't know if that's what we're headed for. I do not know if everything is behaving so differently than it has in the past.
Yeah.
But if you look back to 2008, 2009, and that housing market correction, which that's what it was, the markets that got hit hardest and fastest were the markets that had the biggest increases in the 5 years leading up to that change. So they had huge appreciation. Think of
So is the
Las
case kind of
Vegas,
be made
for
that they're
instance.
just over inflated, so perhaps that's what we're seeing here, that they got prices in some of these states got over inflated. They're like, oh shoot, we've reached the peak. Sellers were like, let's sell now. But while we think we're at the top of whatever this next cycle is, not necessarily a crash, but a cycle. So then supply hits.
Well, think of that appreciation line. If we look at a 40-year line, it should always be 44%.
Yep. So you go way above that.
44.
Yeah.
So if you're way above that, at some point in that 40-year line, there's going to have to be a correction.
Yep.
So that's just economics. That is an economic
But I'm wondering what the pieces are that cause that to happen. Like, I know that happens, but I'm like, what's the behavior that's causing it to happen?
If prices are going up, then builders start building.
Yeah.
Right? People might flood the market with inventory.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And then economic shifts happen where there's not enough buyers.
And then they got to lower the price.
Out.
Yep.
Exactly. Okay. So we get an overinflated supply. Demand drops out due to other economic factors.
And that's what we're seeing right now. Like, Florida is the one that sticks out to me the most because they're having a tough time in a lot of areas of Florida right now. And
I would love for somebody from Florida to talk to us.
If you're listening.
We're curious. So I thought that was just interesting because it did so many of the states correlated with the states that are showing buyers markets, again,
having had the most
statewide
gains.
and economically.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Some other ones that I just found fun. This is going to jump. Whoa, hello. This is going to jump kind of all over for a second, but median net worth. Okay. So humans' net worth.
Net worth, not income.
Correct.
Yep.
Between owners and renters.
Okay.
Okay. In 2009, the median renter's net worth was $7,300. The median homeowner's net worth was $295,500. Okay.
That was what
2019.
year? 2019. Okay. Before COVID.
2022.
Yep.
Median renter's net worth $10,400. Owners $396,200.
Okay.
So owners gained about $101,000 in median net worth, whereas renters gained $3,100 in net worth. Okay. 2025 estimate, renters $10,000 flat, owners $430,000. So in the last 3 years, renters' median net worth has actually gone down, more than likely due to rents increasing.
Yeah.
And owners has gone up $33,800.
Yeah.
So a slower, from 19 to 22, we're talking about $101,000. Well, that's appreciation, right? Like equity in your home, huge. 22 to 25, that next 3-year jump, owners only gained $32,800. If I'm doing that math correctly, $33,800. Whereas renters actually lost net worth. So I thought that was interesting.
And this is why we talk about the power of home ownership.
Yeah.
It seems obvious, but there's a lot of leverage and power in home ownership. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
This I thought was fascinating.
Okay.
Importance of staging per room.
Oh, per
Which
room.
room is the most important?
Oh my gosh.
This is a quiz.
Okay.
Which room do you think is the most important when it comes to staging?
The living room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 37%.
I feel like
of
it's the
consumers
room that I always want to put as the first photo on the MLS, and I want it to be like, yeah.
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 So I just think this kind of data for me is like, oh, you're an agent. You're looking to like revamp your marketing plan, or you're looking to revamp what you're bringing to talk to sellers about, and they're asking you about staging. You pull out this little graph and you say, okay, this is what consumers are telling us.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do. What do you think the next one is? Did you see? Are you
No,
cheating?
I didn't see.
Okay.
Excuse me. Primary bedroom.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Did I get it?
Yes.
Yeah, and then I would say kitchen next.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
You're so smart. I don't know what I would have said. It's hard when you've got it in front of you.
Yeah.
Then it goes to dining room, yard, bathrooms, and children's bedrooms or guest bedrooms are at the bottom.
I know people know that curb appeal is a thing because of HGTV, but I don't know if they really know that curb appeal is a thing. Like,
I don't
even know if I would call it curb appeal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's akin to like walking through a house that has dirty fingerprints on every switchblade in the home. Mm-hmm. It's like sometimes you can just clean things up and weed and put down some wood chips, and like it's enough to just clean it up.
Yeah.
But I was looking at a property that was canceled, expired. Mm-hmm. Listed at 1.3 million. Who knows what it would actually sell for, because it didn't sell, obviously. But they put a ton of money into the inside of the property, and the outside it has no trees. It's like in the middle of a giant field with no shade and no outdoor seating and nothing. It's just a box in a field. And the face you're making, I'm like, I don't know what percentage of people, like, you want to sit on a front porch, you want to have a cup of coffee or a cocktail or what. I don't know. To me, I'm just like, I know that it's sometimes hard to quantify the value of staging, but that could just be the thing that's making your home from this 1.3 quote unquote $1 million property, like, it's just sitting there, because it's just like, why am I going to pay that for a place that feels like it's in the middle of a desert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel about yards. Well, we're in such a seasonality. I mean, we're in
Minnesota. We are.
So we've got like summery summers of all, like we can be at 100 degrees in the Twin Cities, and we can be at negative 40 in the winter, right? With like tons of snow. So, winter, I'm like, whatever. Mm-hmm. Put a wreath on the door. Like make something cute in the front. I always talk about the front door being really important, because that's where people are standing when they're waiting for their agent to get the keys out. And it's like, it's the only time they're forced to stand still, really, in the whole process. Yeah. And so I'm like, and same when they're leaving. A lot of times they're going to kind of stand down on the sidewalk while the agent is locking up, and they're going to kind of wait to chat for a minute. And so I like to make the front, or if there's a front entry or whatever it is, like really zhuzh that up. Mm-hmm. If it's spring, I'm like, do a little light spring cleaning, but I'd rather just focus on that front door and kind of let the rest of the yard. And then I'm like, the deeper into summer you get, the higher my standards are going to be for your yard. It's like in July, August yard, I want something that's a lot different. March yard, I'm going to be like, I don't care. Don't touch it.
We're just still in between snow and slush and dirt. And That's super interesting.
Okay. I'm going to finish this part with just a nationwide forecast.
Okay.
In 2025, the prediction is that existing home sales are going to be up 6%. And this is year over year.
Well, thank
from last
God.
year. Well, it's a prediction. I don't know that it's going to be up 6%.
Listen, I'm betting all my marbles on it.
Now 2026, the prediction is that it's going to be up 11% over this year.
I wonder what they're basing the prediction on. So many things, I'm sure.
A bunch of things. So new home sales in 2025 are predicted to go up 10%.
Really?
I would be shocked if that's the case, although builders are typically the first ones to start giving incentives or reduce prices, because they have to. Yeah. At some point, if they've got inventory, they've got to get rid of it. And so that could be trigger. You start thinking about these markets that are already shifting into buyers markets. A lot of them have a ton of new construction.
Okay. So I've done 2 listing appointments in the last week that had these. I brought it up in one of our office wide meetings this last week. Cause he was like, well, what else do you pull for comps? I'm like, well, these new construction homes aren't comps. They're not comps for a property that's 25 years old, but a buyer's not necessarily like, they might only want new construction, but if they're willing to look at the old home, they might also be willing to look at the new construction. And it was suggested that that's a quote unquote shadow market. It's like, oh, there's this shadow market. Either way, all that to say, if this prediction is right and new home sales go up even half that or more than that, they're going to, like, if you're a seller, you're thinking about seller, you guys are talking to sellers, for sure, look at what else is happening in the area, because that's competition. It's still eating up the buyer pool.
I was going to say, new home sales are not necessarily comparables, but they are always competition.
Yes.
And being aware of where that bracket sits.
Yeah.
If you're anywhere near it,
Yeah.
you better be aware of it.
Yeah.
Because, and then how old are you? Because if you're 15 years old, you're the same kind of construction as them, and you're probably looking a little dated and a little banged up, and you better look perfect. I just had a home. It was built in 2011, so it's 14 years old. There is new construction, and we had to be
like new construction.
And we had to look like new construction and be significantly under their pricing. Both. It wasn't one or the other.
Well, and you've got mechanicals that are all 15 years old at that point.
Roof is 15 years old. I mean, it's all kind of half-life or nearing end of life. Okay, so median home price is estimated in 2025 to go up 3%. So this is appreciation again. They're using median, not average. 2026, 4%. So slightly higher appreciation. Mortgage rates, and I don't know what part, this is probably end of the year for both of these. 2025 prediction is 6.4%. I'm guessing that's end of year because we're higher than that right now. And we were obviously higher than that coming into the year. I don't think it's an average. I think it's a moment in time. So trending down from where we are now, which we've been predicting this for the last 3 years that we'd be trending down at some point. It's just a matter of when. 2026 only down to 6.1. No major relief in mortgage interest rates planned for any time soon. So if you are an agent that is marketing date the rate, marry the house, interest rates are going to come down, refi in a year, you cannot guarantee that. And I wonder how many buyers are going to be upset with their agents who pushed that messaging onto them. I don't love anytime anybody starts to talk about, you'll be able to refi. Well, when? In 7 years?
We don't know.
Because we don't know.
No.
No. And then job gains was the final nationwide forecast on this snapshot. 2025, 1.6. 2026, 2.4 million jobs. So back to your AI question mark. Very interesting that our job market is just expected to go up and up and up.
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. I mean, they're all positive forecasts in the middle of one of the most uncertain times I've lived in. So
it's a little, this is what I'm saying though. This is why the normal rules are kind of out the window. We are just not dealing with any quote unquote, well, history is not repeating itself in this economic climate, which is really difficult. Okay. I'm just going to kind of read through a couple more things. I think this is a lot of stuff. It's kind of reiterating a lot of things that we've talked about over the last few weeks in our happy-ish hours. I'm a broken record. This is actually a kind of mid-year U.S. housing market just overview or outlook. And this was written by, his name is Vincent R. I don't know what his last name is. He is a founding partner of the Global Capital Group, which is an investment company. So they just talk about, as we approach the middle of the year, we're experiencing notable shifts, which are mainly being influenced by high mortgage rates staying, regional disparities, and changing buyer demographics, which I think is interesting. And I'm going to go into that a little bit further. The home
disparities,
regional disparities. I think I don't know exactly what he's referring to here. I think we're going to get into it down a little bit further. I know we are. There's more to come here.
Okay.
So home price trends. What are we expecting? Modest declines. We are expecting, and this is nationwide. This is he's quoting Redfin and Zillow, both companies that I don't know that I trust, although they do have powerful algorithms and they are taking in all of these numbers
I
and
like
making
how you put that. Yeah.
I'm not a fan of either of them just because they're trying to get rid of real estate agents, to be quite frank.
Which hurts the consumer.
Right. And my personal livelihood, which is sad. But Redfin is anticipating a 1% decrease in prices, and Zillow is forecasting a 1.4%.
Okay, I'm going to pause you again. Sorry if this is annoying.
Nope.
I just saw it might have also been from Redfin and Zillow, and maybe you're going into this, but it was like the top 50 metropolitan areas in the United States, and now over half of them, or just half of them, have flipped into price. Is deflation the right word instead of appreciation, depreciation?
Yeah.
So homes are losing their value. They're worth less. And so before it was like, oh, we just have a few cities, a few major areas. And now it's more than half of the 50 biggest metropolitan areas have shifted into we're losing value in our homes now.
Yep. And I mean, that makes sense because 60 markets are showing up as buyers markets.
Yeah.
So those are going to go hand in hand, right?
Yep.
When there's more buyers than more sellers than buyers, and buyers have their choice, more opportunity to negotiate. Homes are going to be sitting longer.
Yeah.
It's going to be more of a challenge to get a home sold. Prices are going to come down a little bit.
Yep.
And these are micro numbers. I mean, 1% is not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen this, I will say, in our market. We've seen certain markets have these little blips where they were negative, like a percent here and there. And then it would be 3% the next month, it would be up. So we've seen this a little bit. We haven't seen it year over year, but we have seen little blips in our month over month, even in a relatively strong seller's market. So I think that's interesting. Mm-hmm. What are those attributed to? Increased inventory, subdued demand.
Yeah.
Basic economics 101. Some regional variations. There are some diverging market dynamics, which we talked about again last week. There is a Sunbelt slowdown. That's what they're calling. That's what he's calling it.
I feel like this should be like a Texas hoedown.
Sunbelt slowdown.
A Sunbelt slowdown.
We could write a song.
Could we do a 2-step to it too?
100%. I think all realtors should need to line dance.
When we do a live event, we're going to do a line dance
to our song Sunbelt Slowdown. Okay. That's a promise. So cities like Austin and Miami, they're already seeing price corrections due to oversupply and affordability challenges. So affordability is another part of this.
Yeah.
Too many homes, prices got driven up too much. This is why we're going to see new construction probably increase as they start to decrease their prices. And I think they mentioned this.
Can we just note taxes too? I was just reading something about because of the rate of price increases, the tax increases have gone up. Well, what that adds to a monthly payment is significant for people. So if you're at the top end of your range and then taxes get increased
taxes go up 20%. I mean, I've heard of markets where people have had a 20-30% increase year over year. That's a ton of money.
Freaking lot. Yeah.
They are using an example of Austin, Texas. There's an 11% price drop from its peak.
That's crazy.
So we are seeing, we're seeing those markets happen.
Yeah.
And then this is our second song. We get to write. It's called Northeast and Midwest Resilience.
Oh, that's not nearly as fun as the Sunbelt Slowdown.
Sunbelt Slowdown.
Same thing.
So for that, they're using markets such as Buffalo, New York, Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm sure the Twin Cities falls into that because we are seeing a resilience here.
Northeast and Midwest resilience. Okay.
And in those markets, we are continuing to see price appreciation driven by strong demand and limited inventory.
Slower appreciation, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Mortgage rates remain elevated. We know this. And in many markets, we've talked about the market is tilted towards buyers with about approximately 500,000 more homes for sale than buyers nationwide, which I think we've thrown that number out in one of our happiest hours as well. Mm-hmm. Some demographic shifts. I talked about this a lot last year or the last few years. Why in the Twin Cities, for instance, are we in a housing deficit? We don't have enough homes. Well, baby boomers were holding in homes that they shouldn't have been in anymore, and we needed their homes, and they're living longer. Yeah. This is going to keep trending. Millennials are the second biggest group of people behind baby boomers. And we're going to have these groups of people that are living longer and longer and longer, potentially. Depends on how our healthcare systems hold out.
Oh my gosh.
We'll see how the U.S. holds out on that. But baby boomers this year reclaimed their position as the largest group of home buyers.
No way.
They're moving. They're starting to move. Now they're moving. They're
not
downsizing.
moving into their kids' homes. They're actually buying.
And they're not moving into
assisted
living and things like that. Again, yeah exactly. Their financial stability also is allowing them to make choices. A lot of them are buying homes outright. They're not buying with mortgages.
Yeah.
I was like, mortgage. What? Mortgages? They're not using mortgages. They're buying with cash.
Yeah.
And so they are able to kind of skip the economic pressures that a lot of the other groups are facing. Millennials and Gen Zs are facing an affordability challenge, whereas that's not, monthly payment is not affecting the baby boomers.
Yeah.
The rental market is seeing rising demand and prices. So high home prices and mortgage rates are pushing more individuals towards renting. So that's putting more demand on rental markets. Demand typically does what? Increases pricing. There's been a slowdown in new apartment construction. Rents are expected to rise. Zillow is projecting single family and multifamily rents to increase by 2.8% and 1.6% by the end of this year. So continued pressure on rents.
So everybody that's listening is a consumer, whether you're in real estate as a realtor or not, you're a potential consumer and home buyer. And I'm facing this. I'm renting right now. I'm in between and I will be buying again. And the question is, how much house will I buy? And no matter how much money I'm making, like what can I afford? And that question, I think, then also comes back to if there's people right now that are like, I don't know, buying is expensive and rates are expensive. But it's like, can we look at our lifestyle again? That's a hard thing to do. I think for a lot of people, it's hard. It's not easy for me to do, to cut things that I'm like, I don't know how long I'm going to live. I want to enjoy my life while I'm living it. I constantly feel that way because I'm like, tomorrow isn't promised. I really live that way to a fault, or try.
I literally had someone say to me today, I wish I knew when I was going to die because I would know how fast to spend all of my investments and enjoy life to the absolute nth degree.
Oh my gosh. There's a book, as an aside, there's a book called Die with Zero. And it's this guy that he was part of the financially independent retire early movement. And so all of these people had saved all of this money and then they died with all of this money, but didn't enjoy life. And so there's this balance, obviously. Yeah. But I will say that if you feel like you're stuck in between a rock and a hard place and you're not, there are programs where you can get in with little down and you can maybe do it if you just sacrifice a little bit on the lifestyle now for the long term. When you look back at the things that we were talking about of the rate of gain in net worth over the period of time, if you're a homeowner versus not, it's short-term sacrifice for long-term gain. And I get it. It's not comfortable and easy. And I'm not talking about I get actually so annoyed when people are like, just buy less coffee. It could be that you're buying $400 worth of Starbucks a month, but I'm like, it probably is more than that. I might have to give up my really posh gym membership plus all of these other things. Yeah. That adds up.
I would also say to anybody, I would never push people I would never push the narrative that you should make those changes and buy a home. Yeah. Because are they going to make those changes, or are they going to buy a home and not make those changes and be financially not in a good place, or be house poor and be miserable, right? I would push, if owning a home and not paying someone else's mortgage, because it's exactly what's driving all of this, right? Other people's have mortgages on those properties and they need that amount covered. It's going to go back to the consumer, kind of like tariffs, right? It's all coming back to the consumer. Right. If you want to be the investor and not pay the investor, right? If you want to be paying your own mortgage, maybe instead of looking at how much coffee you're drinking, look at where in the market are there weak spots. In many markets right now, there are places, there are either locations, there are types of property. I think that a lot of people have the lifestyle problem of their first house needs to have X, Y, and Z.
That's a really good point.
From my perspective, I would say, where is there an opportunity? Look for the ugly house. Yeah. Look for the house with all the different colored walls that you can paint over time.
Or the city over from the city. I feel that. I'm like, I'd love to be within walking distance of all the things. Well, we would all love all of that. But But can you also, a friend of mine recently, or a while ago actually, it was Dave, I don't know, he was talking about housing stuff, and he was like, yeah, my in-laws always say this thing. They said you can be something along the lines of like, think of all the places you could be happy, or you can be happy in a lot of places, or you can be happy, kind of like that's a good place to be happy, and so is that. And like, we can choose to be happy in a lot of different scenarios. Again, I'm not trying to like get on a soapbox about it, but I think I'll speak about myself. We can get stuck in a mindset on a certain thing and then miss opportunity because we're just kind of in a rut in the way that we're looking at it. And yeah.
Okay. So again, this is coming from an investor's perspective. So they're giving a couple like investor thoughts, which I think is really important or like interesting for us to know. So they're saying this current market means caution for investors. We're talking about real estate investing. The places that they're pushing cash purchases. So if you can buy with cash, you should be investing right now because you have a competitive advantage and you should be able to negotiate better deals. And I think that there are many markets where that is holding true. I know there are markets here in the Twin Cities where that absolutely is true. There are some markets where that's absolutely not true. So micro market differences. Regional focus. So again, from an investment standpoint, investing in resilient markets, which were the Northeast and the Midwest, are going to offer more stable returns. Right now is not the time to maybe be looking at investing in some of the.
You're going to hold long term. I'm assuming. Like, if
well, again,
you're
this is investment. So we're not necessarily talking about your primary residence.
Right. If you knew you were going to have a portfolio and hold it for 10 to 15 years, no matter what, which again, nothing is guaranteed. But if
I still think right now would maybe not be the time in some of those markets for secondary purchases because
prices might come down more.
Well, they are anticipating we're on the precipice of some losses. We're just starting to see losses. And so it's a lot.
Right.
It's a lot riskier.
Yeah. Yep.
And then look for rental opportunities. So with rising cheapers, I can't talk right now. With rising rental demand, investing in rental properties could yield favorable returns. So look for areas with limited housing supply. But that's kind of their outlook. So the conclusion, the housing market in 2025 is presenting a very complex landscape. No joke. Certain regions are facing price corrections. Others are thriving. High mortgage rates, shifting demographics are reshaping buyer behavior. They're talking about those like baby boomers being back, some of those demographic shifts. For investors and prospective buyers, understanding regional dynamics and maintaining financial flexibility are key to navigating this evolving market.
Woo. So if somebody asks you, how's the market, you can just send them this episode.
You can say it's incredibly complex.
Yeah.
Why are you asking? That would be my question if I had someone ask me, because you want to find out what's important to them.
What are you curious about? Right? What do you want to know? Yeah, that's good.
All right. I think we did it. Woo! That was a lot. Also, this is kind of the mid-year. So we're getting a lot of like much more zoomed out and predictive thoughts right now versus like what is actually happening. I would say in your market, take some of these things that we touched on today and say, okay, what are these numbers in my market, my state, my county, whatever your macro and micro markets are, and dial in some of these for your market. This is what I do monthly and weekly.
For sure.
I'm consistently looking, certainly monthly for our macro market, which for me is a 16 county metro. And then very specifically for every single listing appointment I go on, I'm really dialing in on, are these numbers holding? Are the macro numbers applying to the micro market? Exactly.
Cherry on top, I would say having this conversation with you helps me a lot as I'm having appointments with potential clients. And you've probably heard it said before, if you're listening, that when you teach something, that's when you really learn it.
Yeah.
And so whether you're like, hey, Mom, can I tell you about the market, or a colleague in the office, whether you feel really well-versed or not, or you're a tenured agent or not, I think it's really good to sit down and have a conversation about it, whether it's taking this episode or take this slideshow that we downloaded and just sit with each other and do what Annalie and I just did and just talk about it. Because you're practicing the conversation and then getting questions. Like, this is real time for us to go, what do you think is driving that? What is that correlation?
Yeah.
Like, I'm thinking real time like any consumer would be, and trying to understand it at a depth that makes it easier to talk about too. So yeah, good stuff.
Love it.
Thank you, Annalie.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for this episode of What
are we doing?
That's all for this episode of Real Estate Done Right-ish.
Look at that.
I don't know what I was thinking about. Until next time, cheers to doing it right-ish.
We'll try. I'll just do it as fast as it feels okay. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general knowledge and informational purposes only and do not constitute professional, legal, or financial advice. As licensed real estate agents in the state of Minnesota, we are not attorneys, financial advisors, or tax professionals, and we cannot provide advice in those areas or in regards to any agency or broker-specific topics in any other state. Any reliance you place on the information provided in this podcast is strictly at your own risk. We strongly encourage you to consult with qualified professionals for specific guidance related to your individual circumstances.
Wow! That was good. All right. Holy
Testing. We tested.
Will you just
Test
look and
your
make sure you're
patience.
check. 1, 2.
Just make sure to get that thing right up in your face, though.
Excuse me, is this thing on? Are you there? Excuse me.
Do you want to drive to International Falls with me on Monday?
Nope. I have a meeting. Damn it. I would, though, if I didn't have anything going on.
I feel like we haven't done this in like 7 weeks.
Recorded?
Yeah.
It's been a minute, yeah.
It's because I missed you.
Oh, we missed each other. And Chrissy said, I've been listening to your podcast. I can tell how much you guys love each other. It's the best. I was like, oh, yeah.
That's cute.
Isn't that cute?
Yeah.
Okay.
I like it.